And let's go straight into this work backwards from the customer. And this is one of those mantras that's used by especially Amazon and many other companies I know. I've talked to many companies, not that well known, but they're pretty successful, and ask them like how they do it. They immediately say they work backward from the customer. Interestingly, when I was in Microsoft and I was doing the project their way, the way the customer backward works, and a lot of elements were also done in Microsoft, but the one key thing that was missing, that it was not work backward from the customer. They were working towards the customer. So they also talked about the customer. They also did exactly the same thing, which is being done by Amazon. But the only difference was turning the wheel. Means it's like one was working backward, another was working towards the customer. And how that makes it doing same thing in just the opposite way, how that makes a whole lot of difference. That's what this is about. So here I'm going to just talk about the philosophy. What is that working backwards from the customer is, and mechanism, how they do it actually, and uh, advantages, and some of the cautions, which I'm going to talk about. And I have created a kind of a sample press release. So basically what happens in working backward from the customer is they start with a press release. Press release is a note, the press note that is released to the press, like my product has been launched, and these are the features of my product. These are the advantages. And basically this is the customer. That's what customer says. That's what executive says, something like that. So that kind of a press release, you start there. And then after that, you started developing your stories, features from there. And once your stories and features are being developed from there, then you started working on them. And you always keep customer focus in your mind. So how do you do that? How is actually implemented? So one key thing you would say, like, do you have to implement customer journey? Do you have to implement this customer backward approach to really take advantage of that? I would say not necessarily. The key thing that you will have to point out in the entire deck or the entire presentation is always keep yourself confined to the real tenets of a good product development. That what is that working backward from the customer, and how I can take advantage of some of those elements. In software development, you must have heard of that BDD, TDD. That's also kind of the same thing. Like you first write the test and then do the development. So here you first connect with the customer. You think as a customer, think about the customer, and then you start writing. You don't start your engineering process, writing your code until you really, really understand that what you want to do, how you're going to go and meet the need of the customer. That's the backward approaches. So like I said, the customer focus is not about getting customers to your product. Getting customers for your products means you create a product and try to bolt in the customers. It's rather creating the right product for the customer. It's somebody's quote, it's not my quote. But what it means is when the customer is there, they have a need. So how to find that need and then go and create a product and iterate on the product to meet the need. So that's the process, which is heavily used in Amazon and many other companies. But and they are, of course, getting a lot of advantages of it. The second part of that is a customer-centric product development process where you actually vet all the ideas upfront. And the reason you vet all the ideas upfront is many times people have like, hey, I have got a great idea and I'm sure, I guarantee this is going to work. This kind of a culture is very much prevalent in Silicon Valley. This is like, wow, they have got a great technology and all they have to do is to just put in the production and people will just start buying like anything. And it's going to sell like a hotcake. Once in a while it happens, but most of the time it doesn't happen. The reason it does not happen is I think it's a great idea. Just because I think it's a great idea, customers don't think it's a great idea. Well, I think it's a great product. There are many great products that got killed because customer didn't like it, even though it was one of those. Google Glass, the many good products. Orkut, the Google had those. Google had many good products, excellent products, which never actually saw the kind of success they wanted, is because they always walked towards that product. They thought like all they have to do is to put a great technology. And so that's what it says. Do not start with the technology. Never. You can have a great idea, everything, great technology. Start with the customer. Understand the need, and then you start thinking in terms of whether you need to go and build that product. Do you need to change the technology? Everything comes later. Never start with that. In most of the companies, what they do is they will have an idea that they have to go and create this insurance product or banking product or credit card or whatever product they have to create. And what they do is like first they'll decide, okay, we are going to use Cassandra, we are going to use this, we are going to use all the technologies decided up front. And then they start implementing it. That's not the way. It's just the opposite. First thing is what exactly customer needs, how I can meet the need, and then, so this working backward is towards that. And the last is keep yourself emotionally detached. A lot of people are emotionally so much invested, especially executives. Oh, it's my idea is definitely going to work. That they forget that this product is not for them. This product is for the customer. So why it's important? Because these are the points you already know, like the customer is very important. They have many options, whether it's, like I said, go for the search engines. You can create huge search engines, Yahoo, Google, Bing, but for customers, it's just a click away. So you can create a great product, but there's always a competition because it's become a lot easier to create those products with the technology. Market is changing super fast. They're getting better, cheaper, even free products, premiums. A lot of good products, certain products are free, and average product is not good enough. The customers become demanding. And so all those things, all these factors force us to go and start thinking in terms of the customer first, because we have to maximize the lifetime value of the customer. The customer is important, and that's the reason we work backward from the customer, because ultimately it's the customer. If they do not use the product, then your product is going to be outdated pretty soon. I mean, all the effort that you can put years of effort, and if nobody uses it, it's of no use. So what is this? So like I said, there are two parts of it in the work backward from the customer. The one is called press release. The second is called FAQs, and I'll show you what it looks like and what it is. And so you start with the press release. So basically in the press release, and I have a sample press release which I'll show you, which I created for a kind of a fictitious product, that how it looks like. But you start with a press release, and press release basically as a tool where you start discussion. You'll say like, okay, so this is the feature. For example, when Microsoft was launching their bookstores, so they will think about the bookstores completely in that press release. Interestingly, this press release should not be 1 to 2 page or 1.5 page, whatever they say. It should be very small so that you only understand the key fundamental features of the product and how in a finished state, the product in a finished state, how that will look like. What is the ultimate motive of that? Why you're creating, how customer is going to see that, what is the product? So this clarity, more like an elevator speech. If you go for the funding, if you have a startup, most of the venture capitalists, they will ask you to give a elevator pitch. Means in 1 or 2 sentences, describe what exactly you're doing. And based on that, they will understand. They will either get impressed or they will say like, no, I don't like your idea. So that is the elevator pitch. So this is more like that. What are the advantages? We'll talk about later. But the press release and who writes it? A product owner. Anybody who is owning that product, they are going to write it. And typically when you write, you do not write this press release alone. You talk to lots of people. You talk to your finance people because they'll create a financial model for your product. You talk to the technology people. You talk to everybody, a lot of people. Average, it takes like, depending on how big the product is, it may take up to a month and more than a month. So a lot of people ask these questions. Why do you spend so much of time, a month and 2 months, just creating 1-page document? The reason is 1-page document you can write in a day, but that's not the real representation of the product. Because It's better to fail. It's better to iterate now than to iterate with the product. Because once you create a product and you go to the market, it's very expensive because you have invested a lot of time, a lot of developers' time, marketing time, and other time. But when you're iterating on the press release itself, you will have lots of ideas and lots of those things you have already thought through. Because ultimately, you're not creating a 1,000-page document, you're creating a one-page document. The key is thinking through all the possible scenarios, all the possible different kind of questions that will come. And you will see the examples of those down there. So, key thing here, when you're working on the work backward from the customer, especially this press release, is to keep the customer benefit in the mind. Why my product is going to solve, how my product is going to solve the customer problem, and why it's better than other products, or what is so different in this that is actually going to go and make the life of the customer easier. If you keep yourself confined to solving the need, and then the people are going to ask questions, the executive will ask questions in the press release, and they may reject it, and again you have to work on it. The key idea is everybody has to get convinced, because ultimately all those people who are looking to, they're also kind of a customer. They may be a customer. So when they look and they ask questions, your press release becomes stronger and stronger. It becomes more appealing. And when everybody likes it, then okay, yes, now we can go and start working on it. I give an example. When I was in Starbucks, they created an application for tipping. Like once you drink a coffee, then you should be able to tip. I remember at that time when we were working, they spent more than $2 million. I don't know the exact amount, but a lot of money on creating that app. And you know how many people used it? In a year, only $40,000 were earned worldwide from that application. So why you're spending like more than $2 million for getting only 40,000? Just because some of the baristas wanted. Average, if you divide into each barista, those tipping amount, it will be like less than $2 or something like that in a year. So for getting less than $2 in a year, you're creating such a huge app. If you go through this process, the press release, PR and FAQ, which is work back from the customer, it will be rejected right up front. But somebody might have an idea. Yes, let's go and do it. It's really going, people are really going to love it. So that's the difference. You articulate the benefit, and PR should be simple, like I already talked about. A typical format of a press release, in the first paragraph, you talk about who is the customer, what are the benefit the customer is getting, what are you launching, explain what the product service is. In the second, you talk about the real problem or the opportunity you have at hand, what kind of problem you're solving, what the opportunities you have. In the third, you talk about the solution approach, how you're solving the customer problem. You don't have to give the technical solution, but you have to give a high-level solution, how you're solving the customer problem. And then actually a quote from the company leader, and then a quote from the customer. And this is going to be a fake quote because you're assuming that the product is launched, it's finished product, it's in the market, and the customer is already using it, and they're giving a comment. So this all you're doing to go into the psyche of that customer and understand how the customer is going to think and what you would like customer to think about your product. So it's all thinking in the future. So you start with the future and work backwards. And then finally, call to action, that what you want the people to do with the product, right?
Just wanted to
next.
just to add a point over here is that when we talk about the press release, the context is that we are creating a press release when for the time when the product is already successful, and we are sending that press release to the some newspaper that this product has been successful because of these reasons, and why it has been successful. So that is the context. So like we already see in the future that product is successful, and then we are trying to define why it is making value for the customer. So just wanted to add that point here.
Yes, exactly. So once a product you have launched in the market, and then you send a press release, and it takes a lot of time to understand like how to summarize features and then write it. So that is working forward. here that you have already written those great things that you would have visualized. And now you're working backward. And I'll talk about the advantages of that. But now let's go to the next one, which is equally important, is FAQ. So a lot of people say, like, why do you need FAQ? FAQ actually is the heart of the whole work backward, because for writing that one page, you have to really, really think through all the scenarios, all the good things. What are the technical challenges? Is it technically feasible? Is it business-wise feasible? All those questions which you're going to see. So first you have internal stakeholder questions, customer questions, and all these you have to anticipate. There's no given. It's all you have to think through. The more you think through, your product is going to be stronger. So here I'll take a kind of a slight segue into another area. Even if you're not doing customer backward approach and you're working on your typical epics or the features, and that's what we used to do in during those days when we were kind of creating that document. We really thought through all the possible ways that the product can fail. And the only thing that we did not do at that time, we never thought in terms of customer. We only thought in terms of product, that how product can fail. What if the product, this feature does not work, this works, is enough, is it not enough? And I remember we were working on a search product when I was there in Microsoft. It was like a unified search. And while working, we had very limited time, but in that, we have only 4 months to develop a platform. And while we're developing that search platform, we thought through every possible thing, is like, what is most important, what we can put that is still usable, because we don't have much time. What are the features customers going to like? What is the real key problem that we have to solve in these 4 months? So when you think through all those things, and there were a lot of in and out, no, this is too big, we cannot develop in 4 months. This is too small, but this is absolutely needed. This is not needed. And that way we just thought so much through that when we created the finished product, it was really like the customer, because it was well thought through. So this FAQ is actually helps you think through as much as possible about the product and finding out whether it's really needed or not needed. Is really solving the need of the customer. And the first is stakeholders, and you'll see what kind of questions you have. Like, who are the stakeholders? Who are the people interested? Who will go and support us in this development? What problem we are solving? What is the pricing strategy? What is the business impact? Is it really going to go and impact the bottom line, or is it just, we are just doing it without knowing the real impact? Then what is driving? If there is a launch date, we have to deliver by this date. What is that? Is it like a promotion for a Valentine's Day or some other auspicious occasions that we are doing this for? Or is it just we are creating a product without any kind of a launch date? What metrics? And metrics is very important. And later on in one of our discussions, I'll talk about the metrics. The way we capture metrics, there are multiple ways of capturing metrics. And this is very important. That's what makes you data driven. So what are the data? A lot of people, when they're creating a product, don't think about what data they want to capture. It's super important to think about that upfront. Because if you do not think about that, that's not going to be integrated into your application. And the data that you may not have the data that you want in order to work backwards from the customer, or even get the intelligence from the market. So that's important. And similarly, a lot of the questions, what is the value proposition? If you look into the customer FAQ, where can I access the feature or application? Is it going to be an Android, iPhone, or somewhere? You need to go and answer all those questions. What will be end-to-end customer experience, right? What customer is going to see? What is going to look like? What are the few samples of the voice of customers? Means like, if you're assuming that you're chatting with the people, or even if you're talking to some customers, like, what are those typical need the customer will have? What exactly they want? What problem they're having? So some of those samples of those, then it will make it more real. Like, you have already talked to at least few customers or potential customers, and then you know that these are the real problems they're going to have. What are the basic features I'm getting in V1? What are the basic features for V2 and V3? And the list of user stories that I remember we used to create right up front, like these are the possible user stories that we can have. So these are, and not all, it's just like some of them to give an idea, like, okay, that's how we are developing, that's how we are understanding, those are the things. All these things will help you crystallize, refine, understand, and make a better product decision upfront. So do we have to go and write all the stories? No, it's just samples or some examples, some high level things. And but this basically shows your hard work behind the product, behind solving the customer problem. Similarly, if you go to technical FAQs, you have to ask what kind of a high level architecture we have. What are the data sources, where we're going to go and source the data, and the different components, just high level, again, very high level that you have to create, not detail. And what are it's not like a big upfront architecture. No, it's just high level so that you understand, like, okay, this is the conceptually, that's what your application is going to look like. Something that you create here at the epic level, a lot of people don't. But so one of the things people ask me is like, can this be implemented in our current work? Absolutely. So these are the key points. Even when you're creating an epic, do not create an epic or a feature in a traditional way that we wrote something and then just divide the work, create a technical solution and write a technical features or something like. No, always think in terms of customers. Always think is what problem you're solving. And every problem that you're going to solve, your epic or your feature that you're writing should always be focused on the customer problem. And that's how you should write it. So your solution will also show that how this epic will solve one particular problem. So you can implement a lot of those tenets even in your current work, even if you're not working backward or you're not working on a press release or FAQ, because you have to think through this. So they have created a mechanism through this PR FAQ to really make you think through it. But even if they don't, that's the way to work. Always think through all the different varieties and different kinds of scenarios. So you can see, these are the technical FAQs. What are the pros and cons? The proposed path is chosen. So this is like in FAQ, when you're creating a technical FAQ, one of the questions people are going to ask is like, have you thought through other solutions? Have you compared that with other ways, of solving the problem? And then you have to come up with the answer, like, okay, we have considered 3-4 different ways of solving this. This is better because of, so it's kind of a very deep level due diligence. So a lot of people then ask me is like, okay, those are the good things with the PR and FAQ. How do I start writing a PR? How can I write a press release? Because when it comes to writing, then, sometimes a lot of people have that moment, oh my God, I can't even start writing it. So there is no fixed rule where you have to start. You don't have to start with the first line. If it helps, always start with FAQ. So key thing here is interviewing and talking to the people. Start talking to the people. Start thinking in terms of all the questions. Start creating a list of questions that you have first, and that is the FAQ, if that helps. And then move towards is like, okay, so now I understand, like, I'm out to solve, this is my core feature. This is the core feature of my application. This is the main workflow. I'm allowing my customer to create a code. I'm allowing my customer to go and choose some product or choose some solution. For example, in my the example I've created here down there, which I'll show you. In that, I have taken an example of a customer. We all have the matching problem, the clothes matching problem. Means when you go to your wardrobe, you don't know which shirt and which pant you need to pick. So basically, this application is trying to go and match it for you based on the latest trend in the industry. And they'll go and understand what is the latest trend, and they'll scan your wardrobe. And then based on that, they'll say like, okay, this is your shirt, this is your pant, this is a better combination. If they don't find a better combination, they'll go to some store and they say like, hey, in your choices store, these are the possible combinations you can buy, right? That comes later as a kind of a notification, but it helps you match. So it's solving the problem is Like Steve Jobs, what he used to do, he will just wear the same t-shirt and jeans every day. And he has like 100 sets of that. So he doesn't have to choose like what he's going to wear a different day. So that is one way to solve the problem. Just have the same set every day and you look exactly the same. You don't have to spend time. But what do you have to wear today? And other is using this kind of an app that solves for you. You look sharp. Okay, so this is the combination that is being suggested based on the current latest trend. So that's the problem you're solving. So when you're writing that press note, you are press release, then you are basically solving, you're bringing that problem up front, and you're solving the problem. You're saving people's time. You're giving them some recommendations, those kind of stuff. So, so how to start writing? Always start with the core functionality. Don't get digressed. Why this is important in the advantages I'll talk about is once you start writing with the core, then you will know where you have to stop. Otherwise, you write everything and your core will be missing. And when you're developing the product, at that time, it is very important that you stay confined, you remain confined to this one particular press release so that you don't digress too much. You are focused, you are still focused on the customer. Because once you start writing, you say like, why not do this as well? Why not do that as well? When you open the hood, fix the other problems. No, remain confined and focused to the key ideas. And that's where when you do this exercise of writing the key ideas and the core, it will help you not digress from the core idea and stay focused on the customer exact customer need. So that's what it is. And the work backward does not stop just in the beginning. You create a work backward approach and you're done. No, it continues even after that. It continues like when you get a customer data, when you get the defects, how to prioritize that. Like I talked about, that you have to collect lots of data so that you can decide whether you have to create a new feature or this feature or that feature, versus you have to pivot. It's also based on the customer data. So you have to again work backwards from there. You have to test your ideas many a time, A/B testing or any other testing. That's also working backward. And you have to stay connected with the real customer all the time so that they will guide you, they will direct you. They will say like, hey, they need some other products, some other features. So all these things are the part of working backward. Working backward doesn't end with this press release. It continues throughout the life of the product. This is very important. So advantages, first of all, due diligence. Second, you remain focused. And in preparing the press release, you learn how to start simple. This is very important because writing one pager for any product is not an easy idea, especially a big product. So how to remain focused to the core, how to keep it simple. And that is one of the keys of agility, is keeping things simple. Keeping things simple does not mean keeping things trivial. You have to think simple means you have to think through all those complex scenarios and find the simplicity in that. Like example I used to give the Leonardo da Vinci, like how do you create a beautiful statue? So he said, like in every stone I see a beautiful statue, all I do is take the rest out of it. So you have to chisel out all the rest of the stones and just leave that beautiful statue there. So that's what it is. That's not an easy thing. It sounds easy, but it's not easy. So that's the beauty of creating that press release, is how to keep that core and the most important thing that is going to solve the customer problem and chisel the rest of the things out. Yeah. So, and next here is caution, which I talk about. Like, do not just go and implement it in any company without understanding, without getting buy-off from everybody. Because just because it worked for some company, this doesn't mean it's going to work for every company, because that also matches with the personality, the team structure, and all those kind of stuff in your company, right? So the best way is to understand those tenets. It's great that you go and implement it if you propose it and people like it, because that's awesome that you start thinking in terms of the product up front and you're iterating on the ideas together. And when you all ideas, it all sinks in. When the idea sinks in, it becomes a lot easier to understand product and the features and the stories and to deliver that. But it's still, The key idea behind this PR and FAQ is understand your customer well, think through all the ideas. You can implement those things even in your current work atmosphere, and that'll make you more successful. That'll make you that make your product more customer friendly compared to any other things, right? If you're not doing that, I mean. Okay, so this is an example. So Shrikant, do you have anything to say here, or?
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, one thing before we go for the press release is that one is we are going to conduct a workshop for, so first of all, we are coming together, me and Ashok, on conducting a workshop for the Scrum Masters. So that will be a master class actually, and that is happening for the first time ever. So in case people are interested, I'll be sending the link in the chat actually, and you can take a look on that. So the idea why we are doing this workshop is that the the real world problems we have in our projects and products are very different than the way we have been talked about the hello world kind of problems. So and the kind of solutions are also way different on them as well. So we wanted to have a discussion about those real world problems, make sure that we have hands-on understanding about them, how to solve them, and that way we become better agilist. So that is basically which is coming on this month, 28th 28th of August and 29th of August. So I'll send you the details of it. So with that, any more details you want to add, Ashok, on that?
Yeah, so basically what I was doing, what we are doing basically, it's a lot of those ideas. And when we talk about the master class, it's not just going to be about that Scrum training, which is kind of fundamental basics everybody know. That's going to be there anyway. We have added 20 modules on top of that, like how to write good stories, how to use, I don't know if you heard of that, called elephant carpaccio, means how to create the thinnest possible slides. What are the process that you go through? Customer journey approach, which I just talked about in the beginning. What is that? How to think about that? So these modules we have added on top of the course so that people really get an in-depth understanding. And this is going to make you somebody better. If you're appearing for that, the agile coach, scrum master, or product owner, any kind of those agile interviews, then you really know that what is the right way to talk, what are the right things to do. And when you're working, then you know that what are the right questions to ask, what is the right solution that you can promote, or right kind of a behavior that you can promote in the company. So the idea is, most of the time I have seen that when the people go for that, and I have attended many of them, the Scrum Master, product owner, or other trainings or agile trainings, so many of them, the people are just confined to the Scrum guide, and they say like, do this, this. And when it comes to the product development, they'll show that old Kano model, like just follow these ideas. But nobody tells you that how you're going to go and become successful in the real life, right? That required some hands-on exercises, thinking through some of those things. Take example, customer journey, how you can implement it, why it's important to think in terms of customer, why it's important not to go and follow the old safe and think in terms of a new journey, customer backward. Even if you're not doing customer backward, why it's important to understand some of the tenets of this PRFAQ and then go and implement. All these things are going to go and make you much more successful, help you become much better agilist. And that's the whole idea behind this agility. That's why I'm here in this field, to educate as much people as possible so that they become more successful and they become more valuable to the market. And you will see in those courses, and each one of them, like I have presented many of them here in Seattle, in many other places. And people still say like, hey, can you come over there in California and give us a presentation on how you actually showed us that we create that from 3 lines of requirement, you created 150 stories. How do you do that? Just now given an extreme example. So thinking through that, how many things you think through that, how you create all those stories. Those are the things that's going to be kind of basically shared, not just like, hey, these are the 3 roles and these are the responsibilities, which is typical. Even there are a lot of nuances that you need to understand, but this is about the overall package. You're understanding not just the fundamental theories, but also how to implement that in your day-to-day life. And initially, we are doing more like an introductory pricing or very low pricing, or maybe like basically to get people introduced to some of these new ideas, new way of learning, new way of understanding agility, and understanding those nitty-gritty. And once you understand, when you start seeing results, then we'll go much deeper into that. Is like, what are the next levels of agility that you need to understand and practice, which I personally see is woefully lacking in many companies I've gone to. And people still have some old myths. I've talked to many coaches and scrum masters. When I work with them, when it comes to solving the real problems, they'll just bring me forward. Ashok will do it, or somebody will do it, because they're not trained that way to solve those problems. They're not trained to think that way. So that's what this whole workshop is about, to prepare as many excellent coaches, excellent product owners with the real life problem solving, tackling, and answering the questions. Anyway, so this is all from me. And finally, coming to this, the press release, you can see I've created, and it will be hard to read because there are a lot of ideas here. So that's how it looks like. The first is the app suggests how people can match the dress in the wardrobe to find the perfect combination using latest trends. And there's a blurb typically that you'll see in the newspaper. This is called blurb. Like if a dress is not available in your wardrobe, the app helps customers buy it online later. So basically your entire idea, you're summarizing in the headline. And underneath you'll write a press release, something like that, like a perfect outfit, which I just created a kind of a fictitious name. A Phoenix-based company today launched a new application or iOS and Android that'll help users select the right combination of the dress, thereby saving a lot of those time in the business savvy customer. So you can see that I've created that kind of a statement. And here I have given our goal with the perfect fit to take the hassle out of matching outfits, said Ashok Singh. Basically, I called myself the creator. So this is a statement from the owner of the company. This is basically the value statements that why we are doing this product. And here you can see a quote from the customer that is given here, what customer thinks about it. And here where it's going to be available. And finally, the call to action. If you want to save some time and effort, download Perfectful today. That's what you have to do it. So this one pager, and I have not created a FAQ because the FAQ is going to be really huge, the big. That's how you create a press release and think through all those questions, and then finally go and present. And by the time you present, though, you know exactly that what you're going to go and build. And this one page will guide your entire development effort, along with FAQ, of course. And that's how you go and take it from the idea to the production right from the customer. That's the whole idea. Okay. Now, any questions?
So, this moment. So actually, one of the question which may be coming in here is about like its relationship with the approaches like design thinking. So is it kind of connected somewhere with
Yes.
that thinking,
Yes.
or how it is actually?
Yeah. So the design thinking comes right after this. So once you start developing the product, once say your FAQ, PR FAQ is approved, then this is just a very high level idea of the key solution that you're presenting to the customer for a particular problem. Does not mean that you have the final solution ready, right? You know the problem. Like problem here is matching. This matching can be done in many different ways. The solution you have is a very high level solution. Like you will have some kind of an ML, some kind of an AI, but when you start solving the problems in a different way, means how you will take the problem and solve in a multiple different ways. And then you have to come out with something that really works. That's what the design thinking is. For example, earlier I gave an example here in the FAQ, you have to create at least 4 or 5 different solutions. Exactly. That's exactly what design thinking is. Design thinking is about how you can think through the multiple different ways of solving the problem and iterate on those and find what is the best way, right? I give an example. When I was in my previous company, they were saying is like how they want to go and increase their revenue. And typically when you say increase the revenue, here I will say like, hey, in the press release, we have to increase our revenue from 3% to 5%. And for that, we are implementing a new way of assigning the high NPV calls to the customers, to the agents, And that's how we're going to go and increase. But there is no one solution to that. There is not a one way to solve that problem. So this is, I just gave you a solution like how we're going to go it. Your problem statement is going to be how to increase the revenue. And finally, when you increase the revenue, I'm going to say like, hey, by doing this, we increase the revenue. But how you will increase the revenue, how you're going to solve this problem, it requires a lot of thinking, a lot of variety of thinkings. And that's where the design thinking is actually incorporated when you actually go to the further defining the product, further defining the solution, and further coming out with an idea of giving you a better options, better solutions. So that's where the design thinking is. Did I answer your question? This you can think like a very high level requirement if you compare with the modern world. But when you actually implement the requirement into the real solution, your design thinking comes there, right there, thinking through multiple different scenarios, different ways of solving the problem.
Yeah, actually, another question is similar to this. Actually, I mean, so the question is about how is it different than the business model canvas? Actually,
sorry, say it again. How is different from business?
Business model canvas.
Business model canvas is another way of understanding different business models. And like I said, this is not the only approach. There are hundreds of approaches in the market where you have to go and you basically try to solve the customer problem, canvas. The key idea here when you're doing press release versus any other thing is you always keep customer in the top of your mind. And you always think in terms of customer. You are attentive to the customer. That makes your customer obsessed. And when you're creating the business model canvas, what you do is you're thinking in terms of product. You can talk about the customer, but the customer is not always in the top of your mind. And why it's important to think in terms of customer is just versus your thinking completely, that you are there to solve a problem. You're not there to create a product. And that's the funda. Like I said, a lot of the, not just business model canvas, there are a lot of other ways that we create a product and all. And in all of those, you can also incorporate your design thinking. But what makes this press release, PRFAQ, different is more than model. You're thinking first in terms of customer. Is it really solving the need of the customer? So when you go for that meeting with the executive with this press release, they will definitely ask about your model if you have created some model, and they'll ask that. But most importantly, their discussion is going to be confined to, is it really solving the customer need? Do you think the customer is really going to buy it? They'll ask 10,000 questions that will prove that customer may not be interested. So this is totally focused on like how this is actually going to go and behave in the market versus how great the idea is and how great your model has come out. So that's the difference. If you can see the difference between those two. Ultimately, you will do the same thing in both. But here it's very much focused towards customer and other is very much focused towards the product.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
So actually we don't, I don't see any further questions on the Slido. So I'm just looking for any questions coming from the people so they can ask directly. A couple of questions, if there are.
Sure, Shrikant. Can I ask a question now?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
All right. So Ashok, this concept seems to be very creative and very innovative idea to me. But my fundamental point is, while we are working with the normal agile teams on the ground,
Huh?
like every team member, whether developers or testers, they're worried about, it's my user story, my piece of software,
Correct.
this is my task, this is my
Yes.
subtask. They're
Yes.
more interested to work completion about that piece of
Yes.
work in their hand,
Yes.
practically. But the point what you said is a lot of merit in it to me.
Yeah.
But how do we take such things to the normal team members? What are
Yes.
couple of things, simple ideas to take such a bright, innovative ideas to the normal team members?
Yes. Yes. So the two or three ways you can do it, and that's what I do it when I go anywhere and I try to implement. I understand the most important thing for you as a coach or anybody who is more like an agile leader is to understand this concept. If you understand the concept, then the actions and things you're going to say, the action you're going to take is going to be very much in line with the right thing to do. Like you know this. If you go and tell like, hey, let's go and implement PRF, because what are you talking about? We don't work that way here, something like that. So how you implement it in the real life? There are two or three ways. Number one, if you have the liberty, you start with the epic or whatever the highest level. If you don't have epic, you get features. If you don't get features, you just get a story. Whatever you get, your so-called the requirement. I don't like to call it a requirement, but still, what you start with there. And the first question as a team, when you're meeting there with a team and anybody, your product owner is bringing your story or a feature or epic, whatever they're bringing, the first question that you ask, and that's how I do, and ask the team to go and train the product owners to be right, is what is the outcome? What is there in for the customer? What is the user? So first bring in the user there, right there. Why you're doing it? What problem you're solving? So if you bring the user right up front in every discussion that you have with that, then they will be forced to explain the why they're doing it. What is that? What is that? They're like, no, just do it and the real outcome will come later. No, explain me what is the outcome that we are chasing and what is the intent, what problem the customer we are solving. So always start discussion there. That's one way to solve it. The second, if they come with a problem, do not just remain confined to the problem and dividing that into your own dev task and saying like, okay, now I got my task, I'm going to solve the problem. Always work together towards that intent. Means how can we go and start writing a BDD on that, an acceptance test on that, and TDD on that. Always work backwards. If you work backward, you will always remain focused on the customer. The second thing you have to do, very important. And third, equally important, that very few company does. Once you create one story or you have completed one intent, whatever, say the product owner says like, hey, this is the intent of the story and that's why we did it. Ask product owner to bring the real user as much as possible. Because internal is easy, external is hard, I know. But as much as possible, say like, hey, we want to put this in production or put in front of the customer and user and want to get their feedback. This is not ready, it's not done, but we have to go and get their feedback. And once we get the feedback, then you know that we are on the right track or not. So these three things at least you can do from working backwards is always try to ask why this is being done, who is the customer, what is the value, what is the voice of the customer, what they want to do, what problem you're solving, how we can go and iterate on those, means like what are the different ways I can solve the problem, which is the kind of incorporating design thinking to that. And third, bringing the actual customer there and demoing that possibly every iteration, if not more than once an iteration, right? If you do these three things, you are basically meeting kind of at least 50% intent of this, the work backward from the customer. And along the way, if you can do TDD, BDD, awesome, right? Because again, you are starting with the behavior of the customer, the intent of the customer first. Make sense?
Sure, Ashok. That makes sense. So, in a way, do you agree that if a team is matured enough and 3 months, minimum 3 months experience doing BDD and TDD, I think
Yeah.
it's relatively easier to get into their minds, right? Whatever your concept you are saying.
Mhm. Even if you're not doing BDT, at least you can ask questions, the basic questions, why we are doing it. What if we do not do this? What problem is not going to be solved? Asking the question, bringing the customer into the mix upfront. This is very important. And that question is, I've seen rarely asked. Very few people ask that question, at least in my experience. Like, what is in for me means as a customer, why I'm doing it. What if I don't do it? Can we live without it? Can we solve the problem without doing anything because it's not solving the real customer need? How do we know it's solving the customer need? How do we know this is the best way to solve the customer need? And then coming out with different solutions and also proposing like, what if we do this? So the more you make the whole session interactive, but versus just making it transactional, like this is my task and I'll do it and I don't care whether it's going to solve your problem or not, it'll become more agile, right? So it should not be transactional, it should be transformational. Each discussion ultimately should lead to a path towards the customer better and better. So you're going to uncover a better ways of solving customer problems. So that's the whole idea. Even if you don't have BDT, TDD, still you need to ask those questions.
I think
Ashok,
one of the problem actually happens to be is that the team doesn't get a chance to interact with the actual customer. So the team generally get to interact with the stakeholders, and then basically stakeholders may or may not really represent what customer feedback is.
Huge
So,
difference.
so that becomes a big problem. And another point is that as a team, we need to really ask like how we're going to validate whether what we have delivered is really, I mean, liked by the actual users or not. I mean, in whatever ways, whether it is through the analytics, through talking to the people, it will be important to understand what the feedback is, because based on that feedback only, you see whether you need to continue working on that feature or not. Generally, again, that doesn't happen. So that is a very important point in that perspective.
so one question that I wanted to ask. So this happened to me quite a few times. A lot of times when we approach with an idea or a product, rather a starting point of an idea, the first feedback we get from a lot of stakeholders is, can you come up with a roadmap? Can you show us a detailed plan and then we will talk about it? How do we get them to a mindset that can we look into what your pain points is first and then talk about a plan? Whereas and I've seen this many a times, including practicing agile organizations where the stakeholders are repeatedly persisting for a roadmap and a detailed plan. How do we handle that situation?
Okay. I mean,
one quick clarification that I would add is, I observe that the PR actually takes a lot of interaction with the customer to come up with it. So there is a bit of a customer's impression which gets into it, right? But to get into that, we first need to get the customer to start interacting. What is a good way to open them up?
Okay, so what basically you're saying is like the stakeholders, first of all, they want to know the complete roadmap. Then you say like, okay, now I'll answer your questions like what do you want to do first, what do you want to do second, right? But they want to see the whole roadmap first.
Yeah.
And I've seen that. And why it happens first, let me explain you. This is coming out of our typical standard, the classical world we used to work earlier before Agile, and what happens is these stakeholders, they want to present your next 3, 4, 5 years of plan, because the management would be very happy if you tell them like, hey, these are the things I'm promising in the future. And then say like, oh my God, I'm going to get this in the first year, this in the second year, 5 year, I'm set. So this give them a sense of comfort. Like for 5 years, I'm set, my position is safe. I know what is going to be built in next 5 years. And all you have to do is to just go and build it, right?
Yeah.
The one thing they don't understand is the market is changing, technology is changing, everything changing is so fast that whatever you are proposing in the next 4 or 5 years is all just a fiction. It's not going to be a reality, right? So the question is, how are you going to approach it? If you go and tell them, I'm not going to give a roadmap, they're like, this guy is not listening to me. So if you don't listen to me, I'm not going to listen to you, you know.
Absolutely.
So in Agile, it's all inbuilt. If you do it the right way, it's all inbuilt. How it's inbuilt? What I do, I'll tell you. I start first somehow or the other with a story map or that customer journey approach, which I talked about. This customer journey basically talks about end-to-end journey. It's not talking about a small piece. So they also want to see many a time that how the whole problem of the customer is going to be solved, not in just pieces. So this customer journey approach, which we talked about, and also going to be part of the workshop which we're talking about. But even otherwise, even if you don't have a journey, if you just create a simple story map, a very simple story map, not very complicated, and you will find out like, this is my MTP, minimum testable product, or MVP, minimum viable product. I don't use the word viable because viable means everything. Not that way. But what is that, the core thing that we are building? What is the next set of thing we are building? What is the third next, fourth next? Basically, what is my MVP number 1, MVP number 2, MVP number 3, 4, 5, 6? That is your roadmap. Okay. The key thing that you have to keep in mind is you can create MVP as a list of features, or you can create MVP as a list of outcomes, right? The whole idea behind this MVP is always work end to end, never work on an isolated single feature. So when executives want you to go and see that roadmap, you create that very high level story map or customer journey or whatever approach that you're following, and you show them that this is first end-to-end thing which I'm trying to implement. And my question is here, and the rest of the things are proposed like this. The goal of the very first thing is to at least enable the customer to go and make a purchase. The second, give them a better payment options. The third is going to be make it more robust with more features and more all those things. So all the time when you're setting a clear outcomes and you're setting that like, this is the first I want to achieve in the first quarter, the second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, you know very well that the thing that is mentioned for the second and third quarter may not turn out to be that way. Why? Because by the time you go to the market in the first quarter with your MVP and you'll get a feedback from the customer, a whole lot will change. And once things change, you have to update your roadmap accordingly. But still, people like to see what the roadmap looks like. So that's how you can kill the two birds with one stone by creating that kind of a start. Always start with a user story map. Find out your first, second, third, fourth MVP. Assign your MVP as your future roadmap. MVP number 2, 3, 4, 5. And start working only on the first one. And then as you get more data, as you get more success, as you refine your ideas working with the customers, keep the customer engaged all the time, right up front. And you will see how much changes you can see. And all those fictions or imaginations that they want to see in next quarters or next year will automatically go and get replaced with the new ideas and the new things as they learn more in the market, more from the customer. Make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yes. Thanks.
Yeah.
So that's how you. Hey, Ashok, Manish here. First of all, thanks for this curiosity within me, where whenever this new knowledge coming from, especially from you, it always been. I've become very curious. I just wanted to understand. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong. This approach sits at the very top of our strategy horizon, where we are planning to make some product or establish a process. Okay. I believe at that space, we already have something like business management canvas, postcard from future and other things. So just curious to know how this approach is different than them, or are we just proposing an alternate approach that this could be also an approach where, we can build up some foundation at the strategy level. That's my first question. Second one is, if we are doing this way, so what sort of a distinct advantages we may get it into at a downstream level? Because essentially this is a very upstream level approach. So if you can just clarify on that.
Yeah. It's actually a great question. And the whole idea behind my presentation was to clarify that. The question that you're asking is like many a time, and I've seen many a time, not in one company, many companies, somebody has already worked on some kind of a model, some kind of a business canvas without even talking to the customer, right? And all they do is hand off those ideas to the next level. And that level in many companies could be like portfolio level, program level, or in many companies, next set of program managers or product managers. And from there, it will come to the product owners. So two key things that we have to keep in mind here. The people at the ground who are developing, they need to, not everybody, but even if one or two people or at least some people, right, should get engaged in the process of thinking about the product as early as possible, not late in the game. Why this is important is because the earlier you get engaged, the more feedback you can provide, the more feasible the solution is going to be, the better understanding you will have, you will get more time to sink in, right, versus getting that late in the game. If you follow this approach, PR FAQ, during that FAQ process, they're so intense and they talk so much to the team that the team really understands what is coming. And if the team really understands what's coming, and if that gets approved, then when you go for the development, you already have a fairly good bit of an idea that what is coming, and then you can start thinking, you will come out with a new solutions, new problems. So the better you understand the product upfront, the chances of your product coming out well, high quality, bugless, more meeting the customer intent is going to be higher. So that's one beauty of doing this, following this approach. The second good thing of this approach is you always remain confined to the customer, so you digress less. So you don't build the code that you don't need. Here I've seen the people build a lot of those codes, which is kind of absolute waste. Nobody's going to use it just because they thought it's important. And when half the way, then I know that a lot of developers are started introducing like, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? And then this business people who had never talked to developers earlier, they started getting confused and they thought like, hey, this is absolute necessity. We have to do it. So both get confused. The business get confused. The thing is very important, and their feature is not going to work because the developers are proposing something. If you don't do that, their product is not going to work. And developers have absolutely no idea of the business intent, the customer. So they think like this is the best way to solve the problem by adding some more features or doing something more than needed. So basically what happens ultimately is they both end up adding a lot of those things which are not needed. So basically the work expands because we do not have a frame of reference, a common frame of reference called like PR FAQ, where we know that we have talked together like this is the exact idea. So that meeting of mind never happens. So that's the fundamental difference between following this approach versus any other approach which focuses on the customer first, where business and technology people have the meeting of their mind up front so that you can have a better idea, you can create a better product, you do not digress too much, you do not create unnecessary code, you do not go and start, second guessing or double guessing.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. That's the beauty of it. And you will say like, hey, those guys don't engage us. That's the whole problem. At whatever stage they get you engaged, you have to ask for getting engaged as early as possible. And the reason they don't engage you is because they think it's a waste of your time. Your time is going to be wasted. Here, of course, when you discuss so much upfront, even before your press release is approved, you're discussing with the customer, your time is wasted. But this is much better than creating a product which
Creating something and making wasteful.
Exactly.
Just one last point here in this. So this press release, who is talking to whom? Is it something product owner is releasing this press release to the customers?
So ultimately, it's written as a way that the company is releasing, but actually it's the product owner who is doing all the work, yes. And doing all the work does not mean silo. That guy is typically a senior guy. So this guy works with literally everybody in the company. Everybody in the company means all the right people that person has to talk to, whether it's a finance guy, whether it's a modeling guy, whether it's an IT, whether the engineers, the teams, they have to talk to get an idea whether the solution is feasible, what are the different ways, you have to talk through it. That's why I say it takes at least 4 to 6 weeks for writing one page. So you can understand how much discussion that happens.
Yeah.
That to an intense environment like the Amazon or those companies.
Amazon and all, correct.
Yes. 6 weeks is a lot of time in those places. Means you have to really invest yourself in understanding. The more you invest, less wasteful code you're going to write. The right thing you're going to write. And the more you're going to go and meet the need. Yes.
Thanks. Thanks,
This one
Ashok.
will be the last question actually for this session. So I think Gaurav raised his hand. So
Yeah, so I have one question here for Ashok. So Ashok, any examples where this press release is used in government projects? Any examples you can give?
In the government projects. So
Yeah.
mostly the government projects, one of the key things in the government project is very much what's called full of compliance. There are a lot of compliance elements, right? So you have to meet those compliance elements first, like whatever the regulatory requirements, and then you have to go and actually go and create a product based on meeting those compliance requirements and the terms of the contract and all those kind of stuff, right? If you follow this approach, and I have followed in personal my life, I have not followed in the government contracts or somewhere else, but I have followed in mostly like the big corporations. What I have seen, if you follow this approach, means you understand the customer intent upfront, your development is going to be much faster because you have already thought through this. Most of the time is vested in understanding the requirement. The story goes to the team and they do not understand what they're building. So half the iteration, half the PI or half the quarter or whatever you call it, they spend in understanding that what actually they're building. This process helps you understand it much better earlier, much earlier. So when you actually, the stories come to your iteration, the things become faster. So when you're doing the government contract, you can do, if you follow this approach, you can do a much better contract, much better understanding. Ultimately, it's the same software development. The only difference between the government contract or the government is there are lots of compliance and regulations, and those are mandated, means you cannot get rid of that. So while you're creating the product, we already take care of those compliance, as you can say, as like one epic, like this is the compliance that we have to go and make sure we have to anyway. Or maybe as part of your DOD, definition of done, like these are the compliant things that we have to go and do for each story, something like that. But if you just set these two aside, all the rest of the work are the same. You have to understand the intent very well. You have to start with the intent, and you have to go and this should be well understood. The sinking of the people, sinking in the mind of the concept should happen earlier than entering the iteration. So if everybody is at the same level, they all understand well, the things will go super fast and you can meet any contract. And the government contract is only about just meeting those additional compliance requirements after that. Make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Ashok.
So thank you so much, Ashok, for conducting this session. I think people must have got a good amount of idea what the press release concept is all about and how it is different than rest of the approaches, and how it is all about building a shared understanding initially, actually, thinking about the customer from the very beginning. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending this webinar. So hope to see you soon in a class or in a webinar again.
Cool. Thank you guys. So enjoy those my initial the workshops and all those lots of those interesting ideas and discussion will happen there. So please join us, ask your people to join that, and let's go and learn agility together. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashok.
Thanks, Shrikant. Thanks, Ashok. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.